morning, everybody. I'm going to give you a brief history of how First United Methodist Church came to be. Now, keep in mind, we celebrate 115 years today. That's a long time, so this story could be a very long one, but we're going to just give it a little snapshot synopsis of how First United Methodist Church came to be. Now, if you know what the word unite means, like the United States, where you've got all these states coming together to be one country, this church also is a story of a coming together. Two Methodist churches uniting to become the first United Methodist Church of Miami. And that's very important, not just that we're united, but that it's first. We're 115 years old this year, and the city of Miami is 115 years old this year. So there's a true story coming together there. This is a story of a church born of the union of two Miami Methodist churches, both of which were originally formed in the last years of the 19th century. We're in the 21st century now. Within 2 years of each other and within one block of each other. Therefore, the early history of Miami and many of its pioneers is woven into this story. It is a magnificent heritage that this church celebrates its birth along with the city of Miami, which was chartered the very same year. In April of 1896, the first train of Henry Flagler's new railroad steamed into the infant town of Miami, a wood-burning locomotive. On such a train, the Reverend Dr. Levi Fisher arrived in Miami in October of 1896. He was the presiding elder of the Jacksonville district of the Methodist Church, on his way to the southernmost church of that huge district that stretched along the entire East Coast, from Jacksonville to the nation's most southern city, Key West. The story goes that Dr. Fisher missed his first boat to Key West that day, and while waiting for another boat to complete his journey, he made inquiry of some fishermen as to whether there were any Methodists in the neighborhood. Why, yes, there are, he was told. He was directed to Bill Wilson's big houseboat. At that time, all services of every denomination were being held in the Presbyterian tent called the Pavilion. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson were enthusiastic about the prospect of starting a Methodist church and offered their houseboat for organizational meetings. And on November 1896, the First Episcopal Church of Miami was organized with a group of 15 people. The first pastor was the Reverend E.V. Blackman. 2 years later, in 1898, the Methodist Episcopal Church South was formed, again with 15 people. And by another strange coincidence of name similarities, the first pastor there was Reverend Fred Blackburn. Worshipping in small white frame buildings that were traditional architecture of that day, and on property that was deeded to them by Henry Flagler, these congregations grew with the city of Miami. In 1913, the Northern congregation moved into its new building and became known as White Temple Methodist Church at Northeast 3rd Street and 2nd Avenue, just around the corner from here. And in 1915, the Southern congregation moved into its new structure and became Trinity Methodist Episcopal Church South at Northeast 4th Street and 1st Avenue, again, just right around the corner. Over the years, White Temple sponsored the building of 5 baby temples. Some of you might recognize some of these community names now. Let me know if you guys recognize it. Alhata, Tamiami, Raider, Hialeah, and Hollywood. And they even provided funds for the building of a baby temple in China. Well, Trinity likewise served as a mother church and organized Sunday schools and churches, which became Coral Gables, Wesley, Holloman Park, Tarboro, Riverside, Highland Park, Miami Beach, and much later, the Norman Methodist Church. You can tell this church is the epicenter of all of the Methodist churches that are in this community surrounding us. These churches actually sent their members as well as their financial help to these churches, sometimes sending 30 to 40 pioneer members out to a new church to help it solidify at a time. Attendance in the two churches soared, both in Sunday school and church, in the 1940s and 1950s particularly. The church was not only an organization for spiritual growth and service, but it was the center of the social world for music, drama, social activities, and all kinds entertainment. It was the place to be. And in 1939, the Uniting Conference of the Methodist Church dissolved the structural lines that existed between the two congregations, the North and the South. But the two churches continued to thrive individually. Negotiations for uniting the two churches go back as far as 1950. But it was not until 1965, just after White Temple had completed their new educational building, when a 14-year-old youth who had escaped from a reform school in New York 4 months before set fire to White Temple and severely damaged the sanctuary. Now, for those of you who know me going back, there's a rumor that might have been me as a young boy, but I have an alibi. I wasn't born yet. But it was at that point that the two churches united in 1966. The two groups merged under the name First Methodist Church of Miami and worshiped in the Trinity Building. In the late 1970s, now this is when I was a little boy, I can remember this. In the late 1970s, that land was acquired from Miami-Dade College, as was the property where White Temple stood. The congregation, many of them third generation and for 50 years plus members, some of those folks are still in the room today, they showed their loyalty and their commitment to the city by choosing to stay downtown, the only inner-city church in the United States to do so in the previous 15 years. Rather than go out to the suburbs, where maybe recruiting members would have been easy, we made a choice as a congregation to stay right here and serve this very, very important neighborhood. Reverend White Kirkland was the pastor at the time and reminded the parishioners that this is just the beginning. A Miami Herald reporter commented that the Lord used a congregation of uncommon grit. Under pioneer members, architects Walter Bagson and Sons, and builders James McKee and Son, the new building was completed on Biscayne Blvd. That's the building we're in right now. They skillfully combined the old and the new in the design of the building, incorporating in the new structure the cornerstones from both White Temple and Trinity. And you can see them right out there as you walk to and from the fellowship hall. They're in the ground as you leave today. Look at those two cornerstones if you've never noticed them right there in the cement. And also out here in the corner of the garden is the cross that stood atop of White Temple for over 60 years. And when they were demolishing White Temple, that cross fell to the ground and stayed intact. It fell over 5 stories to the ground and did not break. Take a look at it when you go out there and imagine these ceilings are over 30 feet tall. The cross that stands atop this building now is almost 5 to 6 stories up itself. Imagine a cross made of cement falling to the ground from that high and not breaking. We are a part of a legacy of wonderful people who have a great God and have been responsible for bringing us to where we are today. May God bless us in this church as we seek to bring life downtown. Happy anniversary.
Amen.